regular Midwestern family. However, I've never fit in, and that's mostly due to my terrible speech handicap from birth. I had a lot of issues because I was dyslexic and had a hard time speaking and getting my point across. Because of my poor communication skills, I was the object of bullying, in contrast to those who were naturally gifted speakers. I should clarify that a bit. Because my words failed me, I resorted to physical force, which only made matters worse. So it's probably not surprising that I became a grunt in the Marine Corps when I enlisted at the age of 18. That event occurred during my first full year in the service. We were stationed at Coronado at the time, where we underwent grueling rubber raft training. The training involved being in and out of cold water continuously, while sprinting along the beach with 8 other individuals, all while carrying a 400-pound rubber raft. As we stepped off the ship and paddled the roughly 1,000 meters to shore on the night of the last exercise, we encountered some unexpected obstacles, such as 4 or 5 foot shore breakers that overwhelmed all of the water flotation devices. After getting drenched in water that was at least 50 degrees, we lay on a beach for over an hour as we waited for everyone to be deployed there. At that point, it was around 47 degrees outside. Hypothermia ultimately claimed the lives of around 6 men. After the workout was complete and I hopped in the hot shower, I felt terrible, but I didn't go overboard. I headed over to see my girlfriend because her house was only about 20 minutes away. Upon my arrival, she uttered hardly a word. The moment she laid eyes on me, she could tell I was exhausted and would be heading directly to bed. If you've ever been so exhausted that you lay down on your bed and it embraced you, that's how it felt when I did the same. However, I regained consciousness and promptly collapsed into the bed. Before I knew it, I was hurtling down the road at a pace that seemed faster than light. No buffeting or similar events occurred. I felt like I was going at 1,000,000 miles per hour. And I wondered, what's going on? Then a figure showed up and spoke to me, saying, "You would call that dying. In just a moment, you're going to have to make a decision. If you go on into the light, you will not be returning to your body." Some might find that concerning, but the truth is that I had never felt pain before until this moment. It was pure bliss. No discomfort was felt. No actual discomfort was felt. No mental anguish was experienced. Something I'd never encountered before. The following event gave me a sense of the significance of my life thus far. It seemed incomplete to me, and then, almost out of nowhere, a voice said, "No, I have to go back. I have way too much left to accomplish." Even though my seemingly translucent light body was still there, the source of the voice seemed to be external to me. It wasn't coming from within. Because it mirrored the emotion that flavor had evoked in me, I took it as my answer. I decided to go back based only on my thoughts. In my mind, I was stepping closer to a dazzling pearlescent golden ball. Just as when the sun is churning and swirling yet smoother, this was even more beautiful and exuded an aura of total tranquility. I felt like I was being pulled back into my body as quickly as a rubber band as I slowed down to approach that ball. My hands, face, and nose, in particular, seemed like they were popping back into place, and that was the sensation I remembered most clearly. I pounded my body so forcefully that it sent me flying into bed. Strangely, as I sat there surveying my surroundings, the room suddenly became dark. My fiancé was fast asleep in the bed beside me when I glanced around. The time had seemingly flown by. In stark contrast to the complete relief I had felt in that light tunnel, the instant I returned to my physical form, I was in excruciating agony. The room was dark. My tears began to fall. Up until that point, life had only meant agony for me, so I couldn't believe I returned to endure even more pain. The lessons I learned from that were invaluable, and I would give anything to share them with everyone. The very first thing that hit me was that I was not a human being having a spiritual experience. Rather the opposite, in fact. From now on, I will not be afraid of dying. Envision your life as someone who knows those two facts with absolute certainty. Just try to put yourself in someone else's shoes if you were completely safe from death. On the inside, though, I was as chaotic and troubled as someone could be. I thought I was unlovable, but maybe if I worked hard enough, I could earn love. Attempts to be heard, understood, and loved consumed my life at that period. It was a regressive mindset that caused a great deal of suffering. When I was in my mid-20s, I finally got home from work. Though I was married and had 2 children, I found my home deserted. Aside from setting the stage for my voyage, this isn't a major plot point. A solitary chair and a scattered book greeted me as I entered the vacant flat. Shirley MacLaine's Dancing in the Light was the book I grabbed up. My interest was piqued. I was in my late 20s when I met a guy who gave me some excellent advice. A major part of transforming suffering into joy is having the confidence to step outside of it and focus on your own accomplishment rather than dwelling on the past. I was hell-bent on doing just that. I made sure to do these things every day. He gave me a meditation technique that helped me connect with my inner peace. If we can discuss this at a later time, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. The second one was inner child labor, which I followed to 1/10 of a century. My life in my 20s looked drastically different from how it does now, a decade later. I had achieved a great deal at that point. My former residence was a spacious 3.5-story bespoke house featuring 4 bedrooms, 3 fireplaces, and a resort-style pool in the rear. Despite the fact that it lacked a mansion, a type of house I had never desired, it fulfilled all of my home-related desires. I had a long-term girlfriend, 5 children between us, a garage full of new automobiles, and plenty of time and money to spend as I pleased. At least on the surface, it seemed like I was living the life of my dreams. Even though there were 5 of us living there, I awoke one morning in the middle of 1996 to discover the house deserted. I brewed a pot of coffee in the kitchen after getting a little extra sleep. A year ago, we had just completed decorating the house and moved in. I went room to room that morning, taking stock of what we had achieved. It was incredibly fulfilling to see my children reunited with their belongings and to live in such a beautiful property after we had lost everything in a house fire the previous Christmas. I hesitated as I strolled by the living room, dining room, and family room, all of which had enormous vaulted ceilings, and I knew that this wasn't it. But I didn't know a thing about it. I was utterly confused by it. So I prayed quietly to God, wondering, what do I do now? My high-paying work was terminated approximately 15 days later, and to my surprise, I rejoiced. I took it as a direct answer to my request. I made sure that my kids and Fee and Cade got what they needed, and I also gave myself everything I had ever desired during the last 4 months of 1996. Although it may not have met the desires of a rich or billionaire, it fulfilled all of our desires. During our trip to the coast, we played golf daily, went to every football game between Arizona State and the Arizona Cardinals, and generally had a fantastic time. In addition to recommitting to my wellness practices, I had a blast. Daily, I would sit in meditation. Every day, I started aligning myself with particular activities and reading books that raised me up. On a daily basis, I also began to exercise vigorously. Actually, I ripped 3 of those stationary bikes apart in about 30 days. You know, the ones you pull back and pedal on in your bedroom. I'm a large guy, around 250 pounds, and I just ripped them apart. The good news is that I got back on track. After those 4 months, I was so moved by the generosity of others that I felt compelled to repay their kindness. For what felt like an eternity, I knew that God had been calling me. I decided after years of avoiding commitment out of fear. In a deep moment of contemplation, I uttered these words to the higher power. I am sick and tired of being afraid. I refuse to let fear control my life anymore. It doesn't matter what you do to me. If you want to destroy me, blow me up. I need to know what's possible. It was a total surrender, from my head to my toes, submitting myself entirely to life and saying, "Do with me what you will." That was the only thing that happened that night, but it was powerful. Curiously, the following day as I settled in for my meditation, I glanced at the clock. It was 8 o'clock in the evening. You and I are one. As soon as I closed my eyes and entered that peaceful place, I heard it. Being in that state of passive observation allowed me to take in all the sounds around me without responding. All these voices that had been instilled in me from childhood erupted in an instant upon hearing the words, "You and I are one," claiming, "That can't be true. That's not possible. You're a liar. That's blasphemous." Those shrieking voices were quiet after what seemed like an eternity. The voice repeated, "You and I are one." The voices screamed once again, but died down after a few minutes. "You and I are one. Ask those voices to identify themselves and follow them to their source. The third time the voice said this, I had an idea and asked, "Who are you?" Their response was, "I am you." I knew instantly, no, no, no. You're not me because I'm the one asking the question. So who were you? They couldn't find any other way to answer than to claim they were me. Their attention waned in response to my probing inquiries. I was suddenly at one with everything as there was total silence, as if I had entered a nothingness. If we are one, then why don't you see life the way I do? I inquired of the same spirit or voice. The voice that answered me said, "You could have that right now. Just say the word, and it will be so." At the end of that phrase, a mesmerizing matrix materialized all around me, a vast network of interconnected, iridescent lights that shimmered and shimmered. There were so many stories that could unfold between body and spirit at that very instant. I couldn't help but blurt out those same words the moment I realized it. I didn't give it much thought. It occurred to me. The thought was, oh, it's like we tell ourselves a giant story. Buy into it hook, line, and sinker, and then we get to live out the stories we tell. At that same moment, I realized that my identity was intertwined with these stories up here, and I could tell a myriad of stories. A multitude of choices were available. You just have to match with those stories over there if you want to live a decadent life. No stories existed outside of the present moment. Neither the past nor the future existed. By altering your narrative, you progressed from one story to another. Thinking, well, how do I change the story if I don't like the one I'm currently living? Came to mind as I saw that. At the time, I didn't completely comprehend it, but now I do. It resembled a large valve or piston in shape. Little valves on the outside allow the piston to close and open repeatedly, as you may have seen if you've ever seen a valve with a piston inside. However, the pressure will continue to build until the valves are closed and the piston remains open. Thus, the gap will remain unbridged. The difference between our current situation and our ideal one is that we are under too much strain. The secret is to just open the end valves. Then you can freely drive that piston in that manner. So I could tell the route was loosening its grip after viewing that. It was enough for me to simply release. I didn't require anything else in my life. What Spirit was asking was unclear to me then, but now I get it. The key was to just abandon any beliefs that don't align with your desired destination. Pay attention to your why and let go of everything else. It's a feeling thing. The following is a summary of the information I gathered over the course of 20 years or more. Before that point in my life, I was certain that I didn't want to be here, which is why I'm only now telling you this story. Living was something I despised. Though it seemed like punishment, this was an obligation I couldn't avoid. As I observed my surroundings, the realization hit me. Oh my God, I chose to be here. I want to be here. There are so many possibilities, and I want this. This realization came at a moment when I had the option to literally return to source. The major decision was that. I still believed that I wanted to stay here, even though I was still going through a lot of suffering and encountering hardships. I have the power to shape my own destiny in a straightforward manner. This is my tale. Right now, those are the two storylines. Here are 3 things to remember. First, that you are a spiritual being experiencing a human experience, not the other way around. Second, that death is merely a transition, not an end. And third, that there are limitless opportunities for you here on Earth. It's limited to what you can physically move to, and more crucially, what you can internalize and experience internally. If you can establish an internal sense of something's actuality, you can take action to bring it into your world.